What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and today we are going to take a look at the Hydra and the build that I'm running on it. This is going to be a little bit different than most of my videos, as this is not going to be a budget or free-to-play build, so this will be using quite a few high dollar amount ship traits, consoles, those kinds of things, so just bear that in mind. This is definitely something good to work towards. And even if you don't have all of it, you could take different pieces of it from this video and apply it to your ship, if that is the kind of build you're wanting to do. So this is going to be a cannon scatter volley build that I did on this. I will be doing another video that's going to be more of kind of a mid-tier C-store ships, kind of basic things that you would need to put together a good, quality cannon scatter volley build, probably later on this week or next week. So stay tuned for that. And let's go ahead and jump into it. So let's start with the aesthetics. This thing looks awesome. Battlestar Galactica-esque kind of front on it. A lot of the vanity shields look pretty decent. I wish the Terran skin would kind of show through those, but it doesn't. But overall, the ship looks really, really good, and I'm really, really happy with it. Based on most of the polling that I've done, it seems that this is a fan favorite. And it deserves to be. It's a good looking ship. They did a really good job on designing it. The layout performance on the ship is also amazing. Very, very good. I've had some of my best runs ever in it, in terms of doing just pug random runs, those kinds of things. And we'll get into that here in a moment. So let's go ahead and jump into the build. So let's talk about kind of what we're focusing on here, and then we'll go through and talk through the gear that's on the ship. So on cannon scatter volley, what we're wanting to do is really boost that firing haste up as much as possible. This build doesn't go to the extreme. There's a few other consoles that we can put in here that would give us more of that, and I know some of the ultimate meta builds are going to have that. I don't, and it's just because I like it this way. And so that's always important to remember. There is your quote-unquote metas, but you can still do extremely well varying from those a bit, and I mean extremely well. So this ship so far, highest run that I've had in just a pug run, just random, was well over 400K. Which even surprised me, which it's a really, really good number. All the stars do have to kind of align for runs to get quite that high, if that's not what you're just constantly practicing and grinding through them. I don't do that all day long, so that's a real good number for me for just a random queued pug run. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into what we got here. So up front, we are using the Terran Task Force as phaser build. This comes from the Terran rep. I'm using two dual heavy cannons. They're sensor linked, or actually they're not, they're emitter linked. Doesn't matter what they are, you could use crafted and they would be just fine here as well. The types of weapons when it comes to, your kind of basic ones like this, Terran Task Force is in its own kind of category. It's definitely the best in the game when it comes to cannons, or the beam version of it's the best. But when we're looking at other weapons, there are some minor variations between what's better and what's not. I think when Spencer, CasualSAB, he did a test on some of the more popular ones, and I think he found the crafted with pin on them were actually some of the best, surprisingly. So you can use, they don't need to be linked phasers, they can be crafted, they can be whatever for these two middle ones. So we're using dual heavies, and then for the fourth cannon up front, I am using the prolonged engagement. This comes from the Phoenix boxes, so if you pop a few of those, you'll get a token that will get you this, and you can just claim it. It does account unlock it for you, so that's really, really nice. The reason we're using this is because it has a chance to apply a fire cycling haste to the weapons. So this performs pretty good. You could trade this out for like quad cannons or another dual heavy if you don't have this, or want to just do a variation on this particular build. Lastly, up front, we are using the wide angle dual beam banks. This is from the Discovery Disco rep, and we're using this in conjunction with the Lorca console. So the Lorca console is awesome all by itself with critical chance, additional weapons power, and shield penetration. When you pair these two together, the two-piece on it is going to give you a stacking critical severity boost. Every time you get a critical hit, it's going to give you one critical severity, and it stacks up to 25 times. The duration is long enough to where basically as long as you're in combat and you have an okay critical chance rate, that's going to stack up and stay stacked until you're finished being in combat. For the space set, we're using pretty much the standard. We are using the Colony Deflector, and this is mainly here for the critical chance and severity boost that you get. I probably should re-roll some of the mods on here. I have a lot of shield cap and stuff, and you can re-roll that to some other things that are going to be a little more useful to you. But the main reason for this is that critical chance and critical severity boost that you're getting from it. Next, we're using the competitive engines, the tactical version of these. These give us a speed and turn rate boost anytime we use a firing mode. It also gives you a tactical bridge officer ability cooldown, which is nice. It goes for 10 seconds, cooling that down faster. These are the go-to if you're going to run a Psi build. I like using the science version of these unless I'm running some other kind of set bonus specific to science, but pretty much everything I'm using these particular engines on. Lastly, on the space set, we have the Disco 2-piece, and we're getting some shield pen from the Tilly shield. I do run my shield power very low, so it's not as much as it could be, but it's more than enough. And the main reason for both of these is when you pair these together, the regen it gives to your hull is huge, and it really makes that difference between, you know, dying or staying alive. Both of these, again, come from the Discovery rep. In the back, I am running the Ultimate Modified Plasma Omni and the Torpedo. These both come from the Lobby store. And you might say, well, why Plasma and why a Torpedo in the back? These here are specifically for the 3-piece. So in conjunction with the Ultimate Modified Swarmer Processor. So let's talk about the console for just a moment. So this is giving us a very nice boost to our critical chance. We're getting some accuracy from it, which isn't a real big deal. But the reason that it's worth, in this instance, taking up all my back slots that aren't really giving me a ton. I'm getting a little bit from the Omni, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but is for that 3-piece. So that 3-piece is going to give us a 100% fire cycling haste for 12 seconds. So it's not real long, but if you're using that at the correct times, you're going to get just a dramatic amount of damage increase from using this 3-piece. When you slot the 3-piece, it actually gives you a let me move it back up. I was moving some things around. It gives you this clicky. So it creates a clicky that you can use from having the 3-piece. When you click that, it'll give you that huge boost to your fire cycling haste. For our experimental weapon, we're using the Soliton Wave Impeller. I still think this is probably best in slot in the game. I also run my engines as my secondary max. So weapons first, then engines, and this is going to scale off of that. So that pairs really nice with it, and it's just a very good performing experimental weapon. This comes off of the Ryzen Corvette, the Tier 6 from a few years back, the summer event, and I believe it's available in the Mud store now, which is kind of a bummer because it's definitely way overpriced. All right, devices, we're running Deuterium Surplus. This is for our speed boost clicky. So clicking this is going to give us some additional flight turn and speed when our evasive maneuvers are on cooldown. Next, we're using a energy amplifier battery for the extra boost to our energy weapons, and then the Kobayashi Maru. When you click this, it comes in and starts spitting out buffs that fly around the map and hit you and your team members, giving you random buffs. It's not a make or break, but it's nice to have since I have extra slots here. All right, so let's talk about consoles. So we already talked about the Lorca console. Next, let's start in engineering. So we have the weaponized helical torsion. This actually comes off of so if you got the legendary, the 10th anniversary, which was the big mega one that everybody loves, it originally came off of the Mir Crossfield, which happens to be in this 13th anniversary bundle. The ship itself isn't bad. It's a good ship. It's not super awesome, but it's a decent ship. But this console for phaser builds, I really like it. You're getting a 15% Cat 1 boost, which isn't terrible. But the 15% critical severity is one of the largest boosts you can get off an individual console. And so that's why I'm using this here. You could, if you don't have this, you could use the M6 computer. That's going to be really similar to the Domino console, which we'll get to in a moment, which is a clicky that gives you a very big fire cycle haste and some bonus damage as well. So you could even argue maybe that might be better than taking this extra critical severity. I just like this console. I have it, so we're using it. But you can get this currently off if you buy the complete bundle for the 13th anniversary. So that's kind of nice that they have included that in. The ship itself, again, I wasn't super excited about, but it does come with this console. And for phaser builds, this is it's a nice piece to have in there. Next, in engineering center slot here, we have binaural infused circuits, and this is here for the giant 26.2% critical severity. This comes from the Lobi store. We're also getting some hull cap, which is helping Tyler's duality, which we'll talk about when we get to traits. We're also getting some control expertise, which on this build doesn't really make any difference. We already talked about the Swarmer console, so we'll keep moving on. We have the DPRM. This comes off the Atlas Dreadnought, and I think it's the Atlas, right? Am I getting that right or wrong? I've had this for a long, long time. I think that's what it is. I'll link, if it's not, I'll link it down in the description for you guys. This is arguably, most people make the claim it's the best console in the game, and I think I agree with that. But I remember when I first got it, and it was before I really started, learning a lot. I knew a lot, from when I was brand new, but I still didn't fully understand. I still don't even fully understand all of it. But I got this, nevertheless, put it on my ship, and I didn't notice any kind of difference, right? So I don't know if you've been there, but I mean, it really comes down to where and how you use it. In terms of staying alive, this is a get out of jail free card. If you're about to die and you click this, you're most likely this is going to bring you right back up because it has a massive amount of healing that it does. It also has a very nice bonus damage, 40%, that runs for 20 seconds while you're above 80%. So if you were close to dying, you hit this within a couple seconds, you'd be over 80% and you would get that large bonus. So it does both sides of the coin, basically stops you from dying in almost any situation, and it gives you a really nice damage boost. And then the passives on it aren't terrible either. So you're getting a 11% to your resistance ratings. Mine on my screen look low because I'm using anchored, so that's actually pulling them down. But when I'm moving, that's much, much higher. And then we're also getting a passive plus 19% to energy weapons. So this is a really good console, but I do not use it on every build. I have a similar build on my Norway that does really, really well, similar to this, but I'm not using it there. I think with the M6 computer on that particular one instead of the DPRM. This is a great all around, especially for running pugs. You don't know what you're getting into. And, if you find yourself in a place where you're about to die and you've saved this and you click it, you get that get out of jail free card. So very, very nice. Next, we have the emulating phaser lance. This comes off the Deimos Pilot Destroyer. This is I think it's a lockbox ship. And what this does is, so first it gives us a couple passives, some phaser damage boost, which is nice. Nothing huge, Cat 1, 15%. And it gives us some Starship Shield penetration, which is nice. Not massive, but it's nice. The clicky on it, though, is very nice. So what it does, I use this on my spam bar. And what happens is that you get 6 charges of these, once per every 20 seconds. So you're able to continually use this essentially every 20 seconds or so. So it gives you a universal console that you can continually click on a really, high rate basis compared to most other things that have, a 2-minute or a 1-minute cooldown. Even with unconventional systems, this thing you can use it just a ton. And so by itself, it does a ton of damage. You can see we're at 31,000 phaser damage every time it goes off. But the real nice thing about this is that because we're able to click it so much, and we do also have some other universal consoles, we're using a Starship trait called Universal Designs, that anytime we use a universal console is giving us a nice boost to our crits, a very nice boost. And we'll get to that when we get to the traits. So this pairs with that Universal Designs very, very nicely. Without having something like this or those space crystals, what were they called? They were like the Davo ones or whatever they were. They came from from one of the events a year or so back. It's similar in that you can kind of keep deploying them. They're like the ground ones. They don't do anywhere near the kind of damage, but you could use that in place of the phaser lance if you have universal designs and want to be able to proc and keep that up on a a very regular or high rate basis. But the emulating phaser lance, it's awesome all by itself, and the way it synergizes with Universal Designs, it's match made in heaven, and you really can't beat it. The problem is that this comes off a lockbox ship, and then Universal Designs also comes off a lockbox ship, the Discovery refit. So you got some money tied up there, putting together just that combination. Forget about the the rest of all of this stuff here, but you really can't beat it. It's awesome. Next, we are using Domino. This is going to come off of the Bajoran. What do they call that? I have it up here saved. Bajoran Interceptor is what this comes off of, and these days is very difficult to get. The issue is, so this was an event ship years back, actually before I even started playing. So if you're someone that has this on unlock, you're pretty lucky, because now you have to get an epic token from the Phoenix boxes, and I haven't seen one of those in probably 3 years myself. I've seen people spend hundreds of dollars buying dilithium. The drop rates, I don't remember what they are, but they are atrocious. I mean, well under 1%. Sometimes they'll have bundles and things that'll include one. It's kind of rare. But if that's something that you need or looking for, that's going to be a cheaper way to go about, I think, unless you're just grinding lots of dill in game, not buying it, and you get lucky and you get one. This or what's the other one? The other Breen Raider. That would be one of my choices if one of those two if you got a epic token. But Domino's great, especially if you're doing phaser. The reason it's great is because it gives us phaser boost, gives us some accuracy. It's kind of like whatever, but when you click it for 10 seconds, you're going to get a plus 25% fire cycling haste for all your energy weapons, plus 25% bonus to all damage, plus 25% recharge time to your bridge officer abilities, and 100% recharge time on torpedo weapons. Torpedo weapons on this one isn't going to be a big deal, but if you defeat a foe, plus 2 seconds duration to all effects. So if you're blowing a lot of stuff up, that'll keep stacking up, and it can stack up to a total of 10 times. So you could get another 20 seconds out of this. So this console is nice. Now, can you imagine, clicking on the 3-piece for that 100% fire cycle haste? The Deimos is going off, Deimos console that is, emulating phaser lance, and you're hitting Domino, and you're hitting the DPRM, giving you all the bonus damages. You're doing all of that at once when you're going in fully buffed up to start shooting groups of ships. Things just evaporate. It's just completely insane. Lastly, let's talk about tactical consoles. We're obviously using all phaser. I have 3 of the exploiters and 2 locators. I'm probably going to go and switch out the locators with exploiters. So I'll have all 5. Because with the traits that we're running, which we'll look at in a moment, this critical chance, it just goes through the roof. Once you get to 100% or 80 or whatever, it's kind of diminishing return. So then it's a matter, okay, well, how much severity am I getting every time I get a crit hit? So you would be better off really stacking these. If you're at 45, 50% and you're also running some traits that give you some boost, you want to just go ahead and start stacking up your critical severity. You're going to get a lot more out of that as opposed to tying in, trying to build up your critical chance rate even more. So if you're in the 50s or even higher than that, start focusing on getting that critical severity up. Let's take a look at the skill tree. Since we're already here, specialization, we're doing strategist and intel is the primary. And I'll just scroll through this. You can see this is the same one I use for everything. It's a catch-all. I use it for EPG, tanking, basically everything on my main here. So that is what that looks like. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the traits we're using. All right, first up in the personal space traits, we have anchored. This is lockbox, buy it off the exchange. What this does is when you're stationary, it's going to give you stacking bonus damage. So you're going to get, I was going to scroll over and hold my place here. So you're getting plus 5% bonus damage. And this is all damage, so it affects everything. It stacks up to 4 times, so you're getting 20% bonus damage when you're still. The trade-off, though, is that it reduces your damage resistance by 5 every stack. So you're also going to lose up to 20%. So I'll find if I've positioned, I'm sitting still, I'm starting to blow things up. If I start taking some heat, I'll start kind of throttling the ship back and forth. I don't know if you've noticed people doing that, and that's because they're keeping this particular trait off by moving so that they have a little bit more damage resistance. Damage resistance is huge. It's how the more damage resistance you have, the harder it is for hit points to go down, essentially. It's similar to shield hardness. And that is something that, with shields not being a big deal, it's hit points and resistance, and then, regens. That's really what's going to keep you alive if you're having problems. In advanced content, the ship kills things so fast that it's not really an issue. The only time you're going to run into a problem is if you go up against enemies that are hitting you with like feedback pulse, because then it's throwing your extreme damage back at you. And if you're going against like, the Queen and Hive Onslaught and it hasn't been sub-nuked, you're most likely going to instantly die. There's not really anything you can do about that, if you don't have someone on the team that is pacifying the Queen when that goes on. Next, we are using cannon training. So this is just a stock trait. Gives us extra bonus damage for our cannons. Next, we are using a good day to die. What this does is this turns go down fighting, which is this ability here, into a clicky that gives you a 50% all damage boost for, is it 20 seconds? 15 seconds. That's crazy. I mean, that's just a massive, massive boost. So if you're tactical, this is one of the tactical captain's abilities, and it's just crazy. I mean, 45-second cooldown. Plus, we're using unconventional systems, which we'll get to in a moment, which cools down. I'm sorry, it doesn't cool that down faster. Intelligence Attaché cools down all your captain's abilities faster as well. So I have that on my spam bar, even though it has a fairly hefty recharge time. When you're running it with Intelligence Attaché, this is going to be up a lot more often. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Next, I am using Adaptive Offense. This is giving us some stacking critical chance. There's probably something better, actually, that we could put here, but I'm not going to mess with it right now. This comes off the exchange, and so does A Good Day to Die. Last on the top, we have Fleet Coordinator. This is a stock trait. It's giving us 2% bonus all damage for yourself and every team member you have, either in a mission or in a TFO, maximum of 10%. So basically 2% for each of you, and normally there's going to be a maximum of 5 on a TFO or in a mission. All right, Intelligence Attaché. So this is what I was just talking about. So what this does is on weapons, critical hit. So this doesn't work for like critical hits from like science abilities and those kinds of things. Anything that's a weapon gets a critical hit is going to restore 2% of your captain's ability recharge. So it's basically cooling down your captain's ability 2% faster anytime there's a critical hit. So if it's at 40% and you get a critical hit, that's going to be, what, 8 seconds? Is that right? Oh, it's late, guys. Now, let's imagine you have 60% critical chance. That's going to be happening a lot. And so these captain's abilities, like Go Down Fighting or like Attack Pattern Alpha, these are going to be up a lot of the time as long as you're in combat and your critical chance rate is high. Next, we are using Terran Targeting. This is for this passive plus 15% critical severity. Very nice boost for just one of these slots. This is one of the best out there, along with Good Day to Die and Intelligence Attaché. These are definitely top tier personal space traits that you want to be on the look for to pick up. Both these as well are off the exchange lockbox items that you can buy off the exchange. All right, next in the middle, we have Self-Modulating Fire. On outgoing critical hit, your energy weapons and projectiles gain a plus 50% shield penetration for 10 seconds. This one, I'm like back and forth. Everybody uses it, but my problem is that it can only be triggered every 45 seconds. So, that means if you're running, a faster TFO, an ISA or some of the other ones, I mean, it's not going to happen very much. I mean, the pug run that I did that was over 400K, it was like a minute long, right? So I probably got 2 out of this, so I guess that's not too bad, but 45-second spread, that just seems kind of extreme to me. I wish that wasn't the way this was. This also is off the exchange. You can pick it up there. Next, we have Unconventional Systems. So this is a really nice console. I don't use it on everything, but if you're using a build, like especially on science builds or on this particular build, I have a few consoles that I'm using. If this was like your top end meta, fire cycle haste boosting build with the M6 computer, and there's another console I can't think of right now, this would be even more important. But basically what it does is anytime you use a control bridge officer ability, you get a 7% recharge speed increase on your universal consoles. So if I use DPRM, it goes through its gyration, it goes on to cooldown, and I start using things like emit unstable warp bubble, or I use the jam sensors, or I use the scrambled sensors, or I use a tractor beam. Those are all control abilities, and every time I use one, it's going to knock 7% off the recharge time of any of my universal consoles. So that pairs nicely with your emulating phaser lance, because it's continually recharging that even quicker, even though you can deploy it really often already, keeping up the universal designs trait, which we're almost to, and we'll talk about in detail a little bit more. But unconventional systems, or uncon, as it's also known, is a great trait. If you're running a build that doesn't have a ton of universal consoles, maybe you only have one or something, maybe it doesn't make as much sense because you got to fill up some slots of your bridge officer abilities with control abilities. So it either needs to synergize, or those have other needed purposes for being there. Or if you have something better, I would replace it with that. But if you have a couple universal consoles that are central to your build, having the unconventional systems is just huge. That all of them on the bottom, except for this last one, those are all exchange items that you would have to purchase off the exchange. Lastly, we have the Boimler effect. So anytime we use a bridge officer ability, so any bridge officer ability is going to give us a 17.5% chance to reduce the recharge time of all your other bridge officer abilities. This does pretty good on most of the builds that I use this on, and it's pretty much everything. I normally will try and still have like a photonic officer, or depending on the build, some of the Borg duty officers will give you a kind of an if-then cooldown. So in any time, I'll just give you an example, and I don't know the designation for it, but if you use a command ability, then there's a 30% chance, and intel abilities will recharge faster, and vice versa, right? So there's other ways to kind of augment this. You could use like Ox to Bat, but maybe just one of them. So there's other ways to do that. I normally just slap a photonic officer in there and don't seem to have any kind of problems. On this build, running it by itself, I mean, I just want to say it's not foolproof, keeping everything up 100% of the time, but it is most of the time. But if you can augment that, then you can guarantee it. So if you can fit that in, if you're using this elsewhere, on this build, like I said, I didn't. That's not a bad idea, but if you can't, it works pretty damn good. This comes from the Lobi store. You can buy it from there. It is not account locked, so it can be sold on the exchange. So you can also buy this off of the exchange as well. All right, let's talk Starship traits. So Starship traits, we're using Withering Barrage. So this comes from like a million different ships, it seems like. This extends the duration of cannon scatter volley by 4 seconds. The maximum cooldown you can have on cannon scatter volley is 15 seconds, and the stock ability runs for 10. So with this trait, that brings you up to an uptime of 14 seconds with a maximum cooldown at 15. So if you're keeping your cooldowns at 100%, this is up 100% of the time minus that 1 second on every rotation. So it's a must-have for your cannon scatter volley traits. And the reason I kind of glossed over that it came from a million different ships is because you can actually get this for free. So in a couple days, there'll be a Klingon review, Jesus Christ, a Klingon recruit event starting where you can create a new tune that's a Klingon recruit. It must be a Klingon. It cannot be like a Romulan that's aligned. It needs to be a Klingon. It'll become a recruit just like all the other different ones they do. You get a little device, and there's different objectives to complete where you get rewards, and you get a ship. That ship has this trait on it. And if you have either purchased the cross-faction ship flyability unlock, or you take a level 65 Klingon, take a level, or a, Jesus, let me slow down. If you take a Klingon to level 65, that also will unlock cross-faction ship flying for free. So if you don't have a Klingon yet, and you haven't, you're just playing Fed, or, and you don't have this trait, when that event starts, I would do the Klingon recruit and unlock the ship and get that leveled up to level 65, and that'll make this ship reclaimable across your whole account and give you access to this trait. All right, next we have the emergency weapon cycle. This is a must-have for any energy weapon build. This comes off a ship from the exchange, and that ship is the Arbiter. And there's also two other variants that are Klingon and Romulan. So if you just hit this with the wiki, emergency weapon cycle, and you'll get the other variants if you're interested in picking up one of the other ones. The ship itself is pretty decent. It's an older ship in the game, but it is good. It's usable. But this trait is really a must-have. So anytime you activate emergency power to weapons, you're going to get a negative 50% weapons power cost for 30 seconds, which is huge. You're also going to get a plus 20% fire cycle haste for all your energy weapons for 30 seconds. And emergency power to weapons, you can basically keep up about full time. You can definitely activate it more than once every 30 seconds. So essentially this trait stays up 100% of the time. And the amount of damage increase you get from even that 20% fire cycle haste, but more importantly, the negative 50% weapons power cost is huge. Your weapons, power, if you were to crank this way down, I mean, you're going to lose half your damage output. And if you're using dual heavies, each one of those is taking 12. I mean, mine's maxed out and I have the cap on it's maxed pretty high. So we're at 125, but if I didn't have that on there and we started using cannon scatter volley, you would see this bar start to really, really dip down and you would take a really big hit from that. And plus the fire cycling haste for any kind of energy weapon build is always a plus. So it's kind of a shame because there's a million other ships in the C-store that I would want to pick that are way cooler, probably better ships. But if somebody asks me, hey, what's the first ship I want, I should get, I'm really trying to increase my performance. Even if you're not trying to high-end deeps chase, but you just want to increase your performance, this is the one to get. And it's not that the ship's bad, it's just been in the game so long, it's just not super exciting. But in any case, it's definitely worth having. All right, next we have Terran Goodbye. So this comes off the Terran warship. This is a lockbox ship. The ship itself is awesome. It's probably one of the top picks. If someone were to ask me, hey, I want to get a lockbox or promo ship of my event campaign, I would either say the Styx or I would say this ship. This ship all around is awesome, and the trait on it you can use on everything. So when you defeat a foe, you're going to get plus 25 accuracy. Not a huge deal, but nice. You're going to get a 5% critical chance boost for 20 seconds. And that can stack up to 3 times. That's 15% critical chance. So let's look at what we're sitting at base, just sitting still here. We're at 54. So that would give me almost 70% critical chance as soon as I kill 3 enemies. And the duration's long enough. If you're staying in combat and things are dying, you're going to keep that up. So that's 70% when you add that to the base of what we have on this ship here. Excellent trait to have. Again, you can use it on everything. It doesn't matter how you kill it. So you can use it on side builds and engineering, anything you want to. Excellent trait, and the ship it comes on is phenomenal. All right, next, universal design. So we talked about this quite a bit when we were looking at the emulating phaser lance. So when activating universal console, lasts for 20 seconds, stacks up to 5 times. We are going to get plus 2% critical chance and 10% critical severity. Stacks up to 5 times. So that's 50% critical severity you're going to get. And then we're looking at another 10% critical chance. So that puts our critical chance plus the base. And from Terran Goodbye, once this fully stacks, it's 80%? That's insane. Jesus. 80% critical chance with this. And that's why the emulating phaser lance is so nice, because you can continually use it. And so you can build these stacks up and keep them up along with some of the other universal consoles that you may be using. It's an excellent, excellent trait. The ship it comes on is a good ship. I really like it. It's probably my favorite, Discovery Crossfield variant. That comes from the refit version of it. So the one with the detached nacelles. I personally really like the way that particular one looks. I know some people hate it. They don't like the floating stuff, and I get it. But I personally like it. The trait's good, and the ship itself is very, very decent. All right, next we have Superior Area Denial. And so what this does is when you activate Fire at Will or Cannon Scatter Volley, it grants one or the other at the tier 1 to your hanger pets. I don't have hanger pets, so that part doesn't matter. Upgrades your energy weapons for 20 seconds, 2 targets, hit, negative 30 all damage resistance rating for 5 seconds. So that's a big, debuff on every enemy that you're hitting. And when you're using cannon scatter volley, and I'm also using some fire at will, which we'll talk about in a moment, mainly to kind of spread that around, that makes it easier for you to take away all those hit points of your enemies, similar to what we discussed in terms of your resistance rating. So this is really a nice trait. It's used a lot on, obviously, if you're going to do a carrier or some kind of pet build. It's also used a lot in support builds. I'm finding I'm using it a lot on just my main DPS builds. There's probably better ways. Like I know there's some other traits that increase your fire cycle haste, and maybe that would be better. I just personally like this, and so that's what I'm using on it. That came off of, I believe, last year's bundle. It's the Mirror Strike Wing. I'll put it down in the description. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's the Mirror Angle, I think is what it is. That it's a lockbox ship, and you could get that from the event campaign because that came out a few years back. It was also included in, I believe, the 12th anniversary bundle. When you bought the whole thing, you got that and could get account-wide unlocked. So that was nice. I picked it up for that, mainly for my support builds. But like I said, I've been using it quite a bit. You could use Cold-Hearted instead if you didn't have that. But that also is going to be an event ship that's now in the Phoenix store. And that comes off of the Breen Raider. So that would be another option if you're wanting to build in some debuff into this. All right, last for the traits, we have the Ruin of Our Enemies. So what this does is when you defeat a foe, you're going to get plus 3% bonus all damage for 20 seconds. That is going to refresh every time you kill something. So as long as you're killing something within 20 seconds of each other, it's going to continue to stack, and it stacks up to 100 times. Now, there's not a lot of maps where there's that many enemies, but let's say that you killed 20 in a particular run and you did it, consistently within that 20 seconds of each one or more. That's 60% bonus damage, and it stays for the duration. So that's insane. So if you're killing a lot of stuff, this trait just stacks up and just really, really adds some massive boosts. Every fifth defeat, it's going to give you a negative 15% recharge time to all your bridge officer abilities. So another thing that's going to help cool things down and manage those cooldowns. Very, very nice trait. This is going to come off the D7 Miracle Worker, which is also a lockbox ship. Is it lockbox or is it promo? Pretty sure it's lockbox. Let me see here. We'll verify. Ruin of Our Enemy, that is going to come from, that's a lockbox ship. So Infinity Lockbox, you can pick up the ship for that trait. All right, let's talk Space Reputation. We are using Advanced Targeting Systems. This is for an extra 20% severity. Next, we are using Precision. This is 5% critical chance. I don't know if this makes sense or not, but it makes me feel better not having any other kind of cooldowns really that are built in. So this is giving us an extra 9.4% bridge officer ability recharge speed. I've heard this doesn't work real well. I haven't really noticed any problems, so I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but because I don't have Photonic Officer or Aux to Bat, I'm just using the Boiler plus some other effects that go off periodically. This makes me feel better having it in there to keep our bridge officers up and running and available to us. And that is the chronocapacitor array. Next, we're using Tyler's Duality. This is giving us a boost to our critical chance. So on this, we're getting a plus 4.5. This scales off of the maximum hit points that your ship has. And then lastly, for our reputation space traits, we have magnified firepower, and that's giving us a bonus damage increase of 6.3% bonus. Very, very nice. Our activatables from the rep. In pug runs, I use the deploy sensor interference platform. This helps takes threat off of you. So when I go into the middle, or if I'm getting really focused by a bunch of enemies, I'll drop this, and that gives me some time to try and recover or kill them before they can finish me off. Also with the quantum singularity manipulator, this gives you kind of a cloak effect for a short period of time and also helps drop that aggro, so that's nice. It does give you a pretty big boost to your science spec, so you can pair it with your anti-time entanglement. So if you have some ships that happen to be grouped up, I don't have any control on this, but if someone else on your team did, or they just happen to be together, you can also pair these two together and use it more offensively, or you can use, the quantum singularity to get yourself out of, a sticky situation. Lastly, we're using the biomolecular shield generator. I don't know that this thing really matters. It just makes me feel better when I'm sitting in it. So that's why that is there. Let's talk stations. So first up, we have tactical. This is the universal slot. We're using distributed targeting. So this is distributing some of our damage out to nearby foes that are close to the enemies that we're targeting. I'm using Fire at Will, and that is mainly for the only two beam weapons on the ship, which is the Atlas Omni plasma weapon on the back and the wide angle phaser dual beam bank on the front. The dual beam bank does a decent amount of damage, but I went this route instead of beam overload so that it would just be spreading as much of that superior area denial around, putting that debuff on as much stuff as possible. So that's hitting stuff behind us and additional targets that the cannons would not be hitting, because the cannons have a smaller arc. And so that helps the team out, and it also helps me out more as well by having that ability there. You could do beam overload. If you're a little squishy, or you're finding you're just getting focused and killed a little too fast, then you go beam overload, and that won't attract as much attention. Because basically with this running, anything that's around me is getting tapped on the shoulder by me, and so that tends to get you focused. It's important, when you're flying a cannon scatter volley ship, to be positioning. You don't want things behind you, because you're not going to be able to put out a lot of damage to them. So you really want to work your way into groups of enemies, tearing down what's in front of you and moving in closer. You don't want to find yourself with their stuff behind you. Next, we're using attack pattern beta, and this is mainly here for the debuff to resistance rating. So this upgrades your weapons to have a negative 39.9 all damage resistance rating debuff on your enemies for 5 seconds. And this refreshes fairly quickly, and it's a nice debuff ability. Let's stick with tactical, and then we'll go through into science. So I have torpedo spread on here. There is a torpedo on the back, but that's not why this is here. This gives me another clicky, and I actually keep it in my spam bar because I'm moving all the time. So this is in my spam bar, and when it clicks this, it activates or does the effect of the competitive engines. So I get that big speed boost and turn rate every so often when this ability comes up. If the torpedoes go off, it'll refresh a little bit faster. But again, generally, I'm not going to be targeting things behind me. So this is mainly here for that speed boost, and that's it. Next, we're using chemocyte lace weaponry. This does okay. It's kind of hit or miss for me, I'm finding, across a lot of my builds. But what it's doing is giving you a chance to have a radiation damage with a 1 kilometer radius to your enemies that are hit. For energy weapons, it's a 10% chance to trigger. If this was a torpedo build, it makes even more sense on that, because you get 100% of a chance for this to trigger. So it triggers every single time when you do fire or use it with torpedoes. But even with the 10% in cannon scatter volley, along with fire at will, we're hitting a lot of targets a lot of the time. So it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it does really good. Sometimes it's just kind of okay. But I think it's worth having there. I don't know what else I would put there instead. All right, so this has Intel Spec on this ship, and we used override subsystem safeties 3. So what this is doing when we activate it, it gives us a range. So it gives us up to 50 maximum and current all power levels. So when we activate that, and let's just take a look at the effect that it has on this ship. So right now, my weapons power is over the maximum at 20 or 125. So max being 100, so we're at 125. Let's go ahead and click that and then see what this looks like. So you can see all the power levels went up. So that went up, spiked for a moment there to 170. That's a huge boost to your outgoing damage. Like I said, these power ratings are massive. Like if you turn this down low enough, your energy weapons won't even fire. And so that is a big boost that you get from activating that. You can activate it fairly often with the cooldowns going. Once you activate it, though, it does every 2 seconds start to reduce those power levels. And once it is run the duration, there is a random subsystem that's going to go offline for 5 seconds. I always pray it's going to be shields or auxiliary, because I don't care about those on this build, but if it happens at like the worst moment when you're trying to transit and it's your engines, you're kind of dead in the water for a few seconds. You could use like engineering team or something like that in order to counter that effect. I just haven't found that it's a big enough problem to where I have to really worry about it. But if you kept, getting a bad roll on that and it's turning your weapons off or your engines off for that 5 seconds, using engineering team would counter that effect. Lastly, for tactical, main firing mode, which is cannon, scatter, volley 3. I think that basically speaks for itself. Now, for all of our science abilities, these are all here for the unconventional system proc. So all 3 of these are a control ability of some kind, and they're activating the unconventional systems, and they are cooling down our universal consoles. That's why all of these particular abilities are here. Same thing with the middle engineering one. So the emit unstable warp bubble, this has a control effect, and it also is an unconventional systems proc. So we have 4 of those on the build in order to cool down our universal consoles. In the first slot, I kind of skipped around there because we were talking about control abilities, but in the first slot on our engineering, we're using emergency power to engines. That's the proc, the duty officer, that will cool down evasive maneuvers. So when evasive maneuvers goes off, it runs for the 7 or 8 seconds, and then it goes on cooldown. Once it's on cooldown, you can activate emergency power to engines, and it'll cool down evasive maneuvers to about 4 or 5 seconds, giving you that uptime there right away. And then lastly, we have emergency power to weapons. This is a twofold, and this is what makes the Arbiter trait really good, is that this bridge officer ability by itself is really a must-have. If this ship only had 1 engineering slot, it would be this on a build like this. If you're running energy weapons, this is one of the things you want to prioritize in your engineering slots, whatever the highest that you can get of it is, which is in the lieutenant commander. But if you only had lieutenant, it would be lieutenant. So this is going to give you a repaired to disabled weapons system. So that, I guess, would also take care of if you got a bad roll on override subsystem safeties, but you would also have to have that just sitting there waiting. So if it timed out right, it would take care of it. More importantly, though, you're getting a 16.6% bonus damage for all your energy weapons, which is a very nice boost. We're also getting a plus 40 weapons power setting, so that's giving us a nice boost to that as well. And then it is activating this trait, which is our, is this the right one? Emergency weapons cycle haste. So I have that on the spam bar, so it's constantly basically running and being activated, giving us very nice boost and activating that starship trait. All right, so that is all of our bridge officer abilities. Let's take a look at the duty officers. This is kind of pitiful, I'll tell you right now. My duty officer game is kind of weak. Right before I made the video, I put this one on there, but most of what I built for, is kind of spread around, but also torpedoes and science is really kind of what I built around for a long time. So I just don't have some of the really high-end, Borg duty officers and things like that that would be for this. I do have some, but they're all for, command abilities and stuff like that that would synergize with torpedo builds. So what I do have on here is an energy weapons officer, and this is giving me a chance to stack critical severity buff when I fire energy weapons, so that's cannons. Next, I have a space warfare specialist, and this is giving me a small boost to damage output to Borg, and it's pretty small, 10% Cat 1, so it's not bad, but like you can see, I don't have a lot else. And then I have the con officer, and that is what is allowing me to cool down evasive maneuvers with emergency power to engines. And then I just added the exocomp. This comes from an event that happens once or twice a year. So I just threw this on there, and the main reason I did that is because it boosts your batteries is what it does. So weapons batteries increase damage by 10% for 20 seconds. So basically it just makes my energy weapon batteries better slightly. So I'll take it. And then I have these 2 other empty slots. I did have 3 empty ones. I'm not proud of it, but I didn't want to just throw stuff in there just because, so I just left them empty. Because I'm not using aux to bat or anything like that, normally that's what would kind of fill these up. So like if I'm not using aux to bat, it's kind of like, okay, well, what else do I have I can put in here? And unfortunately, it's not enough. So I'll need to be on the hunt to get some additional duty officers to put in there. Why don't we go ahead and just run this through an ISA just so we can get a baseline on it, since this is a higher end build, and just kind of take a look at how the ship performs. Then we'll take a look at a couple of the parses and get the video finished up. All right, let's take a look at our parse here. So I don't know what happened to the fifth person, if they just left or dropped out, or I'm not sure what happened, but there's only 4 of us registered in that run. We did a total of 383 K, so 1,000 DPS, which is pretty solid. Up until this point, the Norway, I think, was my favorite for cannon scatter volley. I think it still is, at least in terms of a C-store ship. Well, I guess this is a C-store ship now as well. So prior to this, C-store ship-wise, the Norway was my favorite, the fleet version, which is the Norway. But this seems to be consistently outperforming it. And I had a parse earlier where I was at 460K with this particular build. So this thing just, it rocks, it hits hard. But it's expensive. And I mean, and that's really kind of the problem. I mean, this game, you know, it's free to play, and yes, you can get everything, but it's kind of on the extremes, right? So it's extreme that you can get basically anything except for a lifetime subscription for free, which is nice. But then on the other extreme, everything is really expensive, or it takes you a really long time to get it for free. So my free-to-play accounts, I've been grinding that for now, you know, a little over 2 years, and I have some, you know, pretty nice builds that do very well, but I'm not getting these kind of numbers in pug runs. I'm getting upper 200s in supported runs, you know, over 1 million, but, you know, that's half of what I'm able to get on, you know, my main account that I've spent money on, and I have, to be fair, spent a longer amount of time on that particular account as well. So this build is not cheap. I said that at the beginning, wanted to be upfront on that, but I wanted to add something, you know, in that was on that higher end for you guys that are, you know, looking to push it even farther and either spend money on the game or have been in the game a really long time and just accumulated a lot of this stuff already, where it's not hard to put together stuff like this. A lot of the stuff that I'm using on here, you know, when it first came out was event, you know, kinds of things. And, you know, it basically was free, but now they're very expensive and hard to get. Let's just take a quick brief look at the parse breakdown here. And let's pull that over. And let's go to me. So the 2 dual heavy cannons did basically, you know, a little over 50K each. Terran Task Force did 86K just from that one cannon up front, dual heavy cannon. Terran Task Force is where it's at, cannon or beams. So because there's a beam version of it, and it comes in disruptor as well for both of those flavors. But it is by far one of the best weapons you can get in the game for anything energy related, either phaser or disruptor. Emulating phaser lance, so I mean by itself it did 40K, which is really good. We averaged a 79 and some change crit percent rate through the entire thing, which is right about the math that we did. based off of the traits that we have and things stacking up. This run was under a minute, so this was pretty darn fast. I think the one where I did well over 400k was about the same kind of a time period. Debuff's not awesome, but it's not bad for the kind of build that it is. It's not a debuff build, but it does have some of that built into it, and we really benefit from that. So all in all, I really enjoy this build. It's a lot of fun to fly. It's one of those things for doing dailies and different things like that where you can just kind of mow through stuff. And, if you're somewhat competitive or you're just looking to, just step the game up, this is something that you could, work towards. Again, like I said, it does have some fairly expensive stuff on there, but there's not a lot on it. And we'll just talk about this real quick that breaks the build, right? So if you don't have, these Lobby items in order to get the 3-piece for the fire cycle haste, no big deal, right? But I think one of the only things that you'd have to really kind of pay attention to is if you didn't have universal designs, it would still be worth using the phaser lance. But if you don't have the phaser lance, emulating phaser lance, then it might not be worth using the universal designs if you don't have enough other consoles you can continually click. Because even if you had 3 or 4 universal consoles, most of those are going to have a 2-minute cooldown time on them. Yep, 2 minutes. So on a build like this, I only have 2 other universal consoles that I click. And so, if I didn't have the emulating phaser lance, it wouldn't be worth running the universal designs because I don't have enough consoles to click for it. So that would be really the only thing that if you don't have, you would need to pay attention to. So if you have universal designs, but not the phaser lance or the crystals, then you're not going to want to use that. So that part of it kind of breaks it, but the rest of it, if you're missing any of these other things, just fill it with whatever you have and you can work towards getting it, and it's still going to just work. The core concepts and cannon scatter volley rules are still the same. They don't change. There's not a lot of F-then stuff on this build except for this combination of universal designs and the emulating phaser lance. Everything else, fill it in with what you got, and then you can just work towards with the event campaigns, or if you put some money into the game here and there. But let's face it, I mean, this stuff's expensive. If you would have told me, 3 years ago that I would have stuff like this, I would have said nope. Spending that kind of money on a video game is kind of crazy, but I don't know. COVID kind of changed me a little bit and made me feel like it was okay, but it's expensive, guys. And, luckily I've been around for enough event campaigns, so this is going to be the 4th one, 3rd or 4th one, so you can pick some of those things up if you've been, playing it for a while. But again, it either takes money or a lot of time. So it is true that it's free and you can get everything you need, but you'd be better off getting a part-time job if you have the extra time. You would make enough money to buy all these things in a fraction of the time that you would actually grinding this stuff out, But, if you're retired and you don't have anything better to do, then that's awesome, Or if you're too young to work and you're playing, then, hey, play and earn it out that way. So I'm not knocking it either way. I'm just trying to make sure I'm being transparent. I'm not saying, hey, go buy all this stuff, because it's taken me years to acquire it. I don't gamble either. I don't do the lockbox thing, so I save up the EC and I buy it or use the events and those kinds of things. So that's my little 2 cents on that. Let me know what you guys think about the build down in the description. Let me know what you guys are running. How do you like the Hydra? What are you running on the Hydra? This thing's a great platform. I mean, beam overload you could do on this. I mean, there's a number of different things you could do and do very well. I will put out another video that's going to be more on the budget end for it, because I know that this is going to have a smaller audience of people that are going to be either number one interested or have the resources and gear to match it. But it's a high-end ship with high-end potential that you can get from the C-Store, which is really nice. So I really wanted to show off what you could do when you really max it out. But we'll have a more of a budget mid-tier level build video for this. And so let me know what you guys think. If you have questions, put them down in the comments. Make sure you check out the Discord server. If you have more in-depth questions, there's a great community in there. I'm more than happy to help you guys out. We have a good time. We share pet pictures, food. We talk about Star Trek. Talk about the game. Whatever you guys want. As long as you're cool and you're not a jerk to people, everybody is welcome. So, all right, guys. Until next time, I appreciate you as always from the bottom of my heart, and have a good one. Hey guys, appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and sub to the channel for the latest news updates and how-to guides.